Chapter 8 of Pellucidar. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ralph Snelson. Pellucidar by Edgar Rice Burroughs. Chapter 8. Captive. When Gork and his people saw that I had no token, they commenced to taunt me. "You do not come from Koke, but from the Sly One," they cried. "He has sent you from the island to spy upon us. Go away, or we will set upon you and kill you." I explained that all my belongings had been stolen from me, and that the robber must have taken the token too, but they didn't believe me. As proof that I was one of Hooja's people, they pointed to my weapons, which they said were ornamented like those of the island clan. Further, they said that no good man went in company with a Jalak, and that by this line of reasoning I certainly was a bad man. I saw that they were not naturally a warlike tribe, for they preferred that I leave in peace rather than force them to attack me, whereas the Saurians would have killed a suspicious stranger first and inquired into his purposes later. I think Raja sensed their antagonism, for he kept tugging at his leash and growling ominously. They were a bit in awe of him, and kept at a safe distance. It was evident that they could not comprehend why it was that this savage brute did not turn upon me and rend me. I wasted a long time there trying to persuade Gork to accept me at my own valuation, but he was too canny. The best he would do was to give us food, which he did, and direct me to the safest portion of the island upon which to attempt a landing, though even as he told me I am sure that he thought my request for information but a blind to deceive him as to my true knowledge of the insular stronghold. At last I turned away from them, rather disheartened, for I had hoped to be able to enlist a considerable force of them in an attempt to rush Hooja's horde and rescue Diane. Back along the beach toward the hidden canoe we made our way. By the time we came to the cairn I was dog-tired. Throwing myself upon the sand, I soon slept, and with Raja stretched out beside me, I felt a far greater security than I had enjoyed for a long time. I awoke much refreshed, to find Raja's eyes glued upon me. The moment I opened mine, he rose, stretched himself, and without a backward glance plunged into the jungle. For several minutes I could hear him crashing through the brush, then all was silent. I wondered if he had left me to return to his fierce pack. A feeling of loneliness overwhelmed me. With a sigh I turned to the work of dragging the canoe down to the sea. As I entered the jungle where the dugout lay, a hare darted from beneath the boat's side, and a well-aimed cast of my javelin brought it down. I was hungry. I had not realized it before, so I sat upon the edge of the canoe and devoured my repast. The last remnants gone, I again busied myself with preparations for my expedition to the island. I did not know for certain that Diane was there, but I surmised as much. Nor could I guess what obstacles might confront me in an effort to rescue her. For a time I loitered about after I had the canoe at the water's edge, hoping against hope that Raja would return. But he did not. So I shoved the awkward craft through the surf and leaped into it. I was still a little downcast by the desertion of my new-found friend, though I tried to assure myself that it was nothing but what I might have expected. The savage brute had served me well in the short time that we had been together, and had repaid his debt of gratitude to me, since he had saved my life, or at least my liberty, no less certainly than I had saved his life when he was injured and drowning. The trip across the water to the island was uneventful. I was mighty glad to be in the sunshine again when I passed out of the shadow of the dead world about halfway between the mainland and the island. The hot rays of the noonday sun did a great deal toward raising my spirits and dispelling the mental gloom in which I had been shrouded almost continually since entering the land of awful shadow. There is nothing more dispiriting to me than absence of sunshine. I had paddled to the southwestern point, which Gork said he believed to be the least frequented portion of the island, as he had never seen boats put off from there. I found a shallow reef running far out into the sea, and rather precipitous cliffs running almost to the surf. It was a nasty place to land, and I realized now why it was not used by the natives; but at last I managed, after a good wetting, to beach my canoe and scale the cliffs. The country beyond them appeared more open and park-like than I had anticipated, since from the mainland the entire coast that is visible seems densely clothed with tropical jungle. This jungle, as I could see from the vantage point of the cliff top, formed but a relatively narrow strip between the sea and the more open forest and meadow of the interior. Farther back there was a range of low but apparently very rocky hills, and here and there all about were visible flat-topped masses of rock, small mountains, in fact, which reminded me of pictures I had seen of landscapes in New Mexico. Altogether the country was very much broken and very beautiful. From where I stood I counted no less than a dozen streams winding down from among the Table Buttes and emptying into a pretty river which flowed away in a northeasterly direction toward the opposite end of the island. As I let my eyes roam over the scene, I suddenly became aware of figures moving upon the flat top of a far distant butte. Whether they were beast or human, though, I could not make out, but at least they were alive, so I determined to prosecute my search for Hooja's stronghold in the general direction of this butte. To descend to the valley required no great effort. As I swung along through the lush grass and the fragrant flowers, my cudgel swinging in my hand and my javelin looped across my shoulders with its aurochs hide strap, I felt equal to any emergency, ready for any danger. I had covered quite a little distance, and I was passing through a strip of wood which lay at the foot of one of the flat-topped hills, when I became conscious of the sensation of being watched. My life within Pellucidar has rather quickened my senses of sight, hearing, and smell, and, too, certain primitive intuitive or instinctive qualities that seem blunted in civilized man. But though I was positive that eyes were upon me, I could see no sign of any living thing within the wood, other than the many gay plumaged birds and little monkeys which filled the trees with life, color, and action. To you it may seem that my conviction was the result of an overwrought imagination, or to the actual reality of the prying eyes of the little monkeys or the curious ones of the birds. But there is a difference which I cannot explain between the sensation of casual observation and studied espionage. A sheep might gaze at you without transmitting a warning through your subjective mind, because you are in no danger from a sheep; but let a tiger gaze fixedly at you from ambush, and unless your primitive instincts are completely calloused, you will presently commence to glance furtively about and be filled with vague, unreasoning terror. Thus was it with me then. I grasped my cudgel more firmly and unslung my javelin, carrying it in my left hand. I peered to left and right, but I saw nothing. Then, all quite suddenly, there fell about my neck and shoulders, around my arms and body, a number of pliant fiber ropes. In a jiffy I was trussed up as neatly as you might wish. One of the nooses dropped to my ankles and was jerked up with a suddenness that brought me to my face upon the ground. Then something heavy and hairy sprang upon my back. I fought to draw my knife, but hairy hands grasped my wrists and, dragging them behind my back, bound them securely. Next my feet were bound. Then I was turned over upon my back to look up into the faces of my captors. And what faces! Imagine, if you can, a cross between a sheep and a gorilla, and you will have some conception of the physiognomy of the creature that bent close above me, and of those of the half-dozen others that clustered about. There was the facial length and great eyes of the sheep, and the bull neck and hideous fangs of the gorilla. The bodies and limbs were both man and gorilla-like. As they bent over me, they conversed in a monosyllabic tongue that was perfectly intelligible to me. It was something of a simplified language that had no need for aught but nouns and verbs, but such words as it included were the same